So in the class today, we're not specifically making a finished book. What you'll be learning here are techniques so that you can use your own creativity and your own craftiness and your own artistic talent to make small bound books on your own. So we generally are going to be working on 3 different techniques, but there's like a half extra technique on the first type of book that we're going to be making. So in your kit, you have various colors of, this is just printer paper, but you can use any paper you have on hand. So if you're using an old newspaper, that's fine. If you have square scrapbooking paper, it's fine. You can do any of these techniques with any of the papers that we have. I didn't put cardstock in your kits just because it's a little harder to fold for some people. And when one of our projects we're actually sewing, it's a little harder to sew, and I wanted to make your life easy. So to start with, pick any sheet of paper that was in your kit or anything you have around. Again, you have 8.5 by 11 in your kit, but this will work with any size paper. And for the first project, all we need is the piece of paper and then a pair of scissors that you would use. Oh, welcome. We have another entry. Thank you for coming. And any pair of scissors that you feel comfortable cutting paper with. You know, we have our fabric scissors and our paper scissors. So we're going to need to make one little snip at some point in this process. If you had a pencil around that you wanted to use, that fine, but you don't need it. I'm going to be using a marker just so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. But when I do this for myself, I don't mark it up at all. I just want to make sure that you can see what's going to be happening. So the very first type of book that we're going to make is called a zine, Z-I-N-E, Z-I-N-E, and it's really just short for magazine. And here is one that I made in the past called Cookie Chat. And it is a short book all about some of my favorite cookie recipes. And so a little bit of history about zines. So some of the history that I found, in the late 30s, early 40s, the first recorded zine came about through some sci-fi enthusiasts. So they were sort of like the first fan fiction authors. So fan fiction, if you don't know, is basically just someone who wants to continue a story or write an alternative ending to a story. So let's say you've read all of the Harry Potter books and you really love, you would really love to know, like, what happened to Hermione on her 16th birthday? So you might write an additional story that goes along with the universe of Harry Potter, and that would be called fan fiction. So in the history of zines, the first ones that I could find record of were fan fiction for sci-fi that came out in the late 30s, early 40s. Then skip ahead to the 70s, 80s, zines became really popular in the punk rock music movement, especially around female punk rock bands. So fans would write about the bands, or the bands themselves would write these oftentimes political little books, little pamphlets, and traditionally it would be copied, Xeroxed, photocopied in about a series of about 100, so 100 copies, and then they would be passed out, they would be shared, they would be sold at alternative bookstores. So zines have a really interesting history, and I love talking about them, and I love making them because ultimately it's all made out of one piece of paper, and it's a bit of origami. It's all one piece of paper. So when you're creating these, you can create them on any size paper. It's just a couple of magic folding steps. And I will be posting in the chat a little later a YouTube video I put together to help with, there's one magic step. And if I go a little too quickly today, I wanted you to have a YouTube video that you could watch at your leisure to rewatch that magic step. But ultimately, I think we're all going to be able to accomplish this. So what we're going to need right now is one sheet of paper and your scissors. So here we go. So I have my sheet of paper. Let me get organized here. We can see everything. Okay. So let me see if I can get my light a little closer. Let's see. There. Get a little brighter. Excellent. So I'm going to show you how I teach this, but really these first few steps you can kind of do any way you want, as long as we end up with a piece of paper that has 8 equal rectangles on it. So let's start by holding it in landscape mode, which means the longer side is closer to your belly, and fold it in half so that the short sides touch. So it's sort of like a greeting card. So you're going to fold it in half. You're going to make a nice fold in it. And guess what? If you fold it a little wonky, it won't matter. You can always trim it later. So fold it in half once and then open it back up. And now I'm going to draw on mine. You don't need to do this. I'm just drawing on it so that you can clearly see on camera what's going on. So I have one fold right down the middle. Let's see if I can find a better Sharpie. I have one fold right down the middle. And now I'm going to take either the left side or the right side. It doesn't matter how you start. And we're going to fold the one side to the center. So I'm folding my left side to the center. Make a nice fold on it. If you have a bone folder, how nice for you. That's great, but you can use your thumb. And then you're going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. So folding right to the center. And again, I'm drawing these fold lines on it so that you can see it better on camera. So interesting that in Zoom, you cannot zoom. I don't know who came up with that. So I have 4 equal distant folds. And now we need to fold it in the other orientation. So when I'm teaching kids, there's the hamburger fold, which is that first one we did. And then there's the hot dog fold. It looks like a hot dog bun. So we're folding so that the long sides touch, trying our best to make sure that it is aligned. If it's a little wonky, that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. So again, I'm going to draw in this line here just so that you can see it. And now you see we have 8 equally sized rectangles. Boop, boop, boop. High five everyone for that. So now comes a bit of magic. So you might want to watch what I do, and then we can all do it together. That might be easier. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the paper. I got it in hot dog fold mode, so meaning that the long sides are touching. And I just, no, I'm sorry. First thing I want to do is a hamburger fold. This will make it easier for you. When I'm doing this on my own, I kind of do it real fast, but I want to slow it down for all of you. So I'm going to fold it again in that, so short sides touching. And again, I'm going to make a mark here. You don't need to do this, but you can see your fold lines line up, and there's a center point where the fold lines line up. So on this side is my fold. On this side is open. So from that, I call it my stop sign. That stop sign, which is where the 2 folds meet, I'm going to put a dotted line here because that's going to be my cut line. I'm going to cut right on that fold. Again, you don't need to make that mark if you don't want to. We are not cutting the open side. If you cut the open side, then you'll get to try it all again because it will fall apart. You want to make sure that you have the folded side, and this is where we're going to cut. So go ahead and cut with me. and stop at that point where everything meets, not the open side on the folded side. So if you're right-handed, yours might look like this, cut, 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 but I'm a lefty, so I'm cut, cut, cut. All right. So I'm just going to take a sip of my tea. I hope all of you have a nice beverage with you. Okay, so now's the point when we want to open up our paper and fold it like a teepee. So that hot dog buns, long sides touching, and I stand it up on my table. So it kind of looks like a tent. You can imagine having a little camp out and a fire, and there's the tent I'm going to live in. Now, here's the point where you probably want to watch me do this once, and then we can all do it together. So I have my paper, I'm holding it on the right side, I'm holding it on the left side. It's folded in half. That fold is at the top. I can see my cut area, and I'm going to push my hands together and get a diamond shape. So this is the magic. Woo. You want to keep pushing the paper together so that your beginning and end of your cuts touch. They're like a little kiss. Mwah. So once you've done that, you now have a star shape. You have north, east, south, and west. So I consider like my right hand is my east, my left hand is my west. And I need to get these flaps that are north and south just folded down so that they touch. And it doesn't matter which way you go. So I'm going to fold my north over here. And I'm going to fold my south over here. Just kind of give everything a press. And then I'm just going to, however this fold wants to fold, mine wants to fold under, so I'm going to fold it under. So I will do that all again. This is the only part that's a little brain intensive. So I've got it folded in long sides touching, kind of like a tent on my table. My left and my right hands are holding each side, and I push it together until I get a smooch, smooch. And then I fold these flaps flat so that I can have a small book. And then just take your time and fold real tightly. And mine's a little wonky. It's okay. If I wanted, I could trim that up. I don't need to. I'm not too concerned. But if you wanted to, you could trim that up. And every time you do this, and if you're not on camera, you'll probably fold it nicer and nicer. And now you have this beautiful little handheld booklet of all these little pages. You didn't have to use any glue. You didn't have to sew anything together. I love teaching this to kids. It gets their eye and hand coordination going. It gets them to talk about books, what books are about. I like to suggest to them that they have a theme. So like this one I showed you before is all about cookies, cookie recipes. I've got one here all about popcorn because I love popcorn. So I've got my popcorn recipe in here. And here's a cool one. This one is, you can see it's more rectangular than, so this green one here is our normal printer paper. And this one here is a piece of 12 by 12 scrapbooking paper. So it's the same exact thing. You know, I end up getting my tent, pushing together. And then I call this one the catnapper. And I actually got these magazine bits from the library in that beautiful bin you have, or used to have, of the discarded magazines. And so I started one all about a sleepy kitty, and I will just continue along. So if drawing isn't your thing, or you know, you love scrapbooking, and collage. You can absolutely collage a beautiful little booklet together. And you can see I'm holding it in a different orientation, so it opens up this way. Here's a larger one that I made using larger pieces of paper, and I used a couple of them and I taped them together. And so this one, I teach a lot of little kids. And so this is the sample I show these little kids. And for this one, I'm talking in here about the rainbow. So we're starting with red, and then I'm going on to orange and yellow. And then I use like a centerfold of a green frog. And then I have this teal balloon, and then I'll do something blue and something purple on the back. So your zines, it's great if you have a theme in mind. Here's one I started all about Halloween. Here's one I started all about soup. They are so fun to make that they're like making little batches of cookies. Once you make one, you can't stop yourself. So if there are no questions, I'd love to show you the part 2 to this. So I did not invent zines. Like I said, I've done some historical research on them, and I just think they're the bee's knees. What I would suggest that you do, let me just back up a second, is if you're going to be making a lot of these, like this cookie chat one, I made, I think, 50 of these. So what I did was I laid out my paper. I folded my paper. I did not make this cut. I didn't make this cut. I laid out my paper. I figured out where my front cover was going to be, where my back cover was going to be, and then where each of my pages are. So I have this roadmap that I use so that when I'm designing a new zine, I know where all the parts are. So then I would doodle, make all of my beautiful amendments. You could tape things on. And again, I have not cut this flap yet. And then I would take it to somewhere to be Xeroxed the number of times you want to Xerox it. Get all of your pages, and then you would fold each one of those pages and cut it. But don't cut this before you're making copies. And traditionally, they're supposed to be in a series of 100 or less, but you do you. If you have, this, what a fun bridal shower gift that this could be, or a baby shower, or sky's the limit to what maybe you want to get elected to office somewhere, and you're gonna, you and your niece and nephew are gonna make all these zines. I don't know, but don't make the cut if you're gonna make Xeroxes. If you're gonna do a one-off, just one at a time, then by all means. But making this little roadmap is so helpful because it's not obvious where the back and the front are really going to be until you see it all laid out. Okay, now here's the second part of this. So I think I invented this. I don't know. I call it Zine TV. So it's a zine with an added animation. So here is just a blank zine I have. And what I've done is I've cut a little window and I've slipped in another piece of paper so I can create this animation, almost like a flip book, of this floating heart. And then a sinking heart, how sad. And so here's another example right here. This one, I made it look like a little TV, like we're watching a flickering TV. So it starts off with a nothing and some eyeballs and a meh face and then a happy face. And then again, I can go in the opposite direction. And this one actually has so I have a second window here. This one is, again, I love popcorn, I mentioned it. So this one shows the life of a popcorn kernel. It's a popcorn kernel. And then he's like, oh, surprise, because it's getting hot. And then he's so happy because he turns into a piece of popcorn. You can make it look like this one I did on the cover, you can make it look like an old school Game Boy. So here I've got nothing going on, and then I've got a bud happening and a flower coming up and a whole flower. So the way that this works is you're folding everything exactly the same way. Let me clear the decks here. You're folding everything exactly the same way. You're just making some windows in your paper. And I like to make the windows after I've folded it, because I like to know that I have an open space where my paper can come through. If you don't do that, if you end up you could put an animation on every single page. You would just need to make a little cut. Let's see if I can get that. You just need to make a little cut in the top so that your page has a way of coming through. So this, I'm calling it Zine TV. It's a way to do like a stop animation, added creation in your zine. And I just think it's so fun. And again, I imagine that you're going to go forth and teach this to 1 million people. And I just don't know who wouldn't be tickled by creating their own animation. Could imagine asking someone to marry you. Oh, that would be so sweet. Or we're having a baby. Oh, so sweet. Or we're having a cat. Oh, how wonderful. So that is my 1.1 version of our bookmaking for today. So can I answer any questions? Is everyone well? Awesome. Good job, everybody. Okay, so I'm just going to clear my decks. The next bit is going to be, we need scissors and we need 2 or 3 pieces of paper. 2 or 3 pieces of paper. We're going to be creating a book binding that has no sewing involved. Again, no tape, no scissors. I'm sorry, no staples. We do need scissors. We are going to be creating a book binding that you can continuously add to. So if you, again, are into journaling, or you collect, maybe you collect stamps, or you collect stickers or something, and you need to add more pages, this book allows you to continuously add pages as you go. I did not invent this. I read about this a long time ago, and I couldn't find a reference to who invented this. Otherwise, I would gladly tell you. So this starts with 2 sheets of paper. You can pick any colors you like. If you pick 2 different colors, you're going to get a different cover and backside right now, but it really doesn't matter. So we're going to take each of our sheets of paper, and again, this wouldn't matter what size paper you're using. We're going to start again in the horizontal landscape configuration. So the longer side is closer to our bodies, and we're just going to fold in half, like how we started the last project. Fold it in half. Bada bing. Having a sip of tea. Everyone have a sip. We could play like a tea drinking game every time I say bada bing. And then do that again with a second piece of paper. I'm going to use 2 different colors just so it's easier for you to see on screen, but you can do anything you want. And again, it doesn't matter the size of the paper. I would just suggest using the same size for both sheets. Again, I'm going to draw on mine. You don't need to. I just want to make sure you can really see what I'm doing. So we've got to decide what is my inside of my book, which actually becomes a backing page because we're only using 2 sheets, and what becomes the outer part of our book. It doesn't matter what you choose right now. We are going to be making cuts that are not the same. So our outside pages and our inside pages, they're cut differently. So about a third of the way down on my page. Where did my marker go? Here it is. About a third of the way down. I could measure this. If you want to measure, go for it. You don't have to. But it's about the size of a Post-it. So if you had a Post-it on this 8.5 by 11, about the size of a Post-it. Let's see, my paper is, so that's like an inch and a little. I'm just gonna eyeball it. That's kind of how I play. And I'm eyeball it again. Maybe up a little higher. So this is gonna be an outside. I am gonna cut where that dotted line is, that dotted line. So I'm going to open up my page and I'm gonna cut on the fold about a third of the way up, from the end to about a third of the way up. And I'm gonna do that on the top as well. I'm gonna cut from the top about a third of the way down. So I will have flaps. And I can see my eyeballing. I need to go a little further. Again, you could measure, don't need to. Okay, so now for my inside, and again, this is not exactly inside because we're only using 2 sheets of paper. If we were using more sheets of paper, it would be. We're gonna cut the exact opposite. So for the inside, I need to cut this area. So for the outside, I cut the top and the bottom. For the inside, I cut this middle area. And you may be thinking, well, how am I going to get my scissors in there? You can keep it folded. You can keep it folded and just do a little snip to start. You could fold it in the opposite direction to get just a little snip to start. Or if you're very careful, you could puncture the paper with your scissors. But however you do it, just be careful. And we're going to cut so that we have a slit in the center. And again, you don't need to use those, you don't need to make marks with anything with a marker. If you're helping a little kiddo out, maybe you want to help them by giving them a stop sign. But essentially, you just need a slit in here. And don't get a paper cut, please. Okay. So we have our outside that has cut at the top and the bottom. We have our inside that has a cut on in the middle of the page. Now here's the magic part. This is so fun. This is exciting to me. Weird hobbies, how paper comes together for books, that makes me excited. So I've got my outside paper. I'm gonna take the back page and I'm gonna roll it up. So I kind of have like this letter T, a hammer. So I'm gonna roll that up so that I can stick it through the slit in the paper. And then I'm just gonna pull all the way through until it stops, and then open up my pages. And then fold everything back together. I have a bound book that is not going anywhere. No staples, no glue, no sewing involved. And then anytime I want to add more paper, I just have to make another page. So if I want to get another page in there, I just have to cut that top and bottom again. So cut about a third of the way up, cut about a third of the way down, and roll it, roll it. And I probably would do this all at once. I would figure out how many pages I wanted. But like I said, if you wanted to keep adding, you could just then slip this in. Slip it in. unfold it, and now you have 2 more pages in your book. And you just can keep going and going. But like I said, you can do, you could fold a number of outside pages and a number of inside pages all at once. We just did one today just so that it's easier for you to handle. When you're doing books that are more substantial, let's see, like this one has I maybe started with 8 pieces of paper. When you're holding more pages, it's a little bit more fiddly to get it all in there. But I think it's just pretty neat. And if you were really careful and cut everything exactly, I have a little overlap here because I did not cut exactly, but if you did, this would line up better. But again, you could cut this all off and make it nice and neat if you wanted. If you have a paper cutter, you could do that. And I just think it's the bee's knees. I just think that's so cool. Again, it's not going anywhere. You can take pages out anytime you want. You can add more pages. I think it's pretty cool. Do we have any questions? Anything I can help with that? Super smart. So happy. Okay, so I'm just having a tea break. Delicious. So the next one is so fun. They're all fun. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you which one is my favorite. They're all so neat. So the next one is going to be our traditionally hand sewn little book. And again, you could use any size paper you wanted. You could use this blue one. I have cardstock as the outside, and then just the same paper that we've been using for our other projects. So what you're going to need is you're going to need some of the paper that is left in your kit, and you're going to need your sewing needle, which was wrapped in a piece of yellow paper, I believe, in your kits. I also gave you some beads, some really large beads, but you could do this with buttons. You could do this with little bells, would be very sweet. Imagine, this would be so beautiful to give as a gift for someone, like for their wedding, if have their vows in it. Like, this is such a fun project. So we need to thread up our waxed thread that I've given you and your needle. I've also given you other thread. That's just so in case this was too hard for you to manipulate to get the wax thread in through the needle. But this wax thread is traditional bookbinder's thread. Don't put it in your sewing machine. If you ever buy some, don't put wax thread in your sewing machine. It'll gunk up the works. So we need our needle and thread. There's no knot in the end. There's no knot in the end. And we need our paper. And eventually you'll need your beads if you want them. So I'm actually going to work on, I'll work on large ones. Let me get a yellow and a pink, just so it's easy for you to see on screen. So what we are learning to make right now is called a signature. A signature is a series of pages bound together. And if you wanted, you could add signatures, you could add multiple signatures together to make a larger volume of a book. So what we're learning to do is make a signature, which could be its own book. Like this one right here is just 2 sheets of paper and this cardstock. So without the cardstock, it could still be a book. But to use the right terminology for bookbinding, we're creating what's called a signature. So if you're ever looking at like a how-to online and they say, fold and sew 8 signatures, what they're meaning is do what we're about to do 8 times. So I've got 2 pieces of paper and I'm being careful that they are stacked neatly. And I'm going to fold it in half. And just like the other projects, it doesn't matter which way you fold it. This will work with any size paper. This will work with just about any weight of paper. You will just have a harder time sewing it or getting the initial holes in your paper when you use heavier paper. That's why I didn't include cardstock, because I was just afraid it might be too hard for some people to get through. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to be making 3 holes in the edge of our paper, in this binding right here, where it's folded. You could do 2 holes. So in this sample I have here, that's in this sample, no, in this sample. In this sample, I only have 2 holes. I have one right here and one right here, and you can see the thread is loose in between. In my other samples, I have 3 holes, and that's what we're going to be doing today. But you could do 5, you could do 2. You just needs to be more than 1 for this technique. And I'm just going to be teaching you the very basics, but you can go down a happy rabbit hole. There are all different types of bindings, and they have wonderful names, like the Hungarian technique of binding, where you weave the threads in different ways. And oh, it's just so fun and exciting to me. So we're essentially going to be making 3 holes in our page. We're going to make 1 in the center, 1 some distance from the top, and then an equal distance from the bottom. So this time I am going to use my ruler, but feel free to eyeball it. And again, I'm going to use I'm going to open it up. It's a little easier if I make my marks on the inside. I will mark this with a marker, but you might want to use a pencil, or again, you can just eyeball this. So I need 4 1/4. That's my center. And then I'm going to go, let's see, 1 1/4 and 1 1/4 there. So that's where I'm choosing to make my holes. And I should have, I want to have my marks right in the center, right on that fold. So we need 3 spots, 3 spots. So if you don't have a puncturing tool, that's fine. I have a real like bookbinder's toolkit, but really you can do this with just the needle I've provided in the kit. So with the paper, you're looking at the inside of your signature or the inside of your book. You want to hold it in a way that you can, with your dominant hand, put the tip of your needle on that point you made. And what you're going to do is hold the needle while you pull the paper toward you. So essentially, we're just making a hole here. And I like to wiggle it around to make it a little bit larger, because our thread is going to be going through each of these holes a number of times, especially this center hole. So I have a hole there. If you had a long hole punch, you could use that, a teeny tiny one. Again, I have an awl that I use when I'm making other books, but this needle will work just fine. So then I'm going to go to each of my points. So I push the needle against the paper and I pull the paper towards the needle, and that gives me a really nice hole and doesn't rip the paper. So we should, at the end of this, have 3 holes in our paper. Easy peasy. Okay. All right. So now we're just sewing. It's just sewing, but there's no knot in the end of our thread. There's no knot in the end of our thread. We need to decide, do we want to have this begin and end on the inside of our signature book? So in this case, I have my knot on the inside. In this case, I have my knot in the outside of the signature. It really doesn't matter for this practice that we're doing. Just know that you can choose where that shows up. I'm going to choose to put it on the outside of my book. So this pink, I'm thinking of this pink as the outside. So what I'm going to do is wherever I want the end of my thread to show up, I need to touch that part of the paper first. So if I want it to show on the outside, my needle has to touch the outside first. If I want it to show on the inside, I have to touch the inside first. And I just unthreaded myself. Bada bing. Okay. So now we're just sewing. So I'm taking my needle, I'm going through the center, and I'm gonna pull, but not all the way through. So if you can get your thumb to hold the thread, or if you had a light tack tape, you could use that. And then because this is what we're gonna knot off essentially. And then I'm now on the inside. I've gone through from the pink side to the yellow side. And now I am going to go up or down. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go back up to one of the holes I haven't been to yet. So I'm not going around the paper, you see, it's just going to lay in this crease, and I pull. Boop. So now I've got my end in the middle. I've come up from the inside to one of my other holes. And now I'm going to go back down the center. But I don't want to stab this thread. So just make sure you're not stabbing the thread at this point. I'm going to go back down the center. And I'm going to pull, but not too much. I don't want to rip this paper. If we had sturdier paper, if we were using like beautiful linen paper or rice paper, maybe not rice paper, but a cardstock or something, you could pull a little bit more, but you just want to be careful that you don't rip the paper. That is one of those things you do once, you make that mistake once, and then you vow to never do again. So I'm now back on the inside. I'm going to go to the hole I haven't been to, which is this one for me, right there. And so the inside is sewn. It's got two lengths of thread. I'm now going to go back to that center hole. Again, being careful not to stab the thread itself. Dun, 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 dun. All right. And now we need to get back to the outside so that we can knot these threads together. So if I come back to the inside, this part I'm going to hold up as close as I can for you. If we were just to go right back down into that center, our stitch would just pop out. So what we have to do is do some sort of dance around one of your previous sewing excursion. So I'm going around this stitch right here, and then I'm going to go back into that center hole. I said that center hole really gets a lot of love. Okay. I'm going to take my needle off, put it somewhere safe so the dog doesn't get it. And now we have a sewn signature, or you could call this a completed book if you wanted. So now I will make some sort of knot. A square knot is fine. Because this is waxed thread, it holds on to itself very well. So you don't have to do anything really heroic here. I'm just making a knot. And if you wanted, you could take your beads, slip a bead on, you can do all sorts of creative stuff here, I slipped a bead on, purple bead, and I'm just going to make another tie there. And then I could just continue on as I want. Another bead. And again, you could use buttons, you could use nothing. You don't have to do this. You could tie on some waxed dried flowers, would be really beautiful. So this is either a completed book or booklet or one signature. I would not put the beads on if I was making multiple signatures. If I did have this as multiple signatures, what I would then do, if we imagine that these are the same size, the sample is smaller, I would hold them together, and then instead of knotting as we did right there, I would come around this one first and then knot it. And that knot, I actually do it at each hole, would come around this thread. And then when I came back to the center, it would be stitched together. Each of these signatures would then be stitched together. And it's another one of these things. It could be a building on project. I can imagine maybe once a year you create another booklet and add it to this larger book. You can create a new signature and add it to a larger book. Just keep sewing it on and sewing it on and sewing it on, over and over until we cover the world in books. Again, you could use this for scrapbooking. You could use it for stickers are really popular again. I remember, I grew up in the 80s and stickers were the jam, like scratch and sniff stickers, and you have your own sticker book was so exciting. Like kids are, and not just kids, but adults too, are collecting stickers again. So this might be a really great way to collect stickers. Again, if you're trying to find something to do with little kids, such a great project, and they feel like they have, the magic of creating your own book is, I don't know, much more that could be fun for them to do with just using their hands. It doesn't include a screen. It's not a video game. It costs almost nothing to make these. It's just a quite enjoyable process. So that is the end of my speech. I would love to answer any questions. Oh, who's the little fella there? I would love to answer any questions. I'm going to turn my camera around so that we can see eyeball to eyeball again. So I'm just going to shut my camera down.